So, Dr. Muhammad, let's start by, for folks who aren't that familiar with your framework. So your framework for culturally and historically responsive literacy really focuses on four learning pursuits. So identity, intellect, criticality, and skills. Now, for folks who aren't familiar, can you maybe give us a overview of what those mean, and how does this approach differ from how teachers have traditionally been taught to teach?
Yeah. So, as I was studying these Black literary societies throughout the 1800s, I really wanted to know what were some of the learning goals that they had when it comes to literacy learning, but also for educational learning, not just thinking about like English language arts or literature. I also thought about mathematics and science and history. And so when I was studying the historical archives, like public addresses that they had given during that time, old newspapers that they had published in, I came to an understanding that they essentially had these four major goals for learning. And they called their learning goals pursuits. And so they did not call them learning standards, because I found that learning standards comes more from Eurocentricity. It's a word that's sort of like seeped in whiteness. It wasn't a word that communities of color used to describe their learning goals. And so of the four goals, the first was identity development. I noticed that every time they were reading and writing and thinking and learning, they were making sense of who they are, who they were, who they weren't, who they wanted and desired to be. So all the complexity that comes with identity, they were making sense of their lives. And they were also learning about the lives of other people. They would read and learn from literature from all over the world, including China. And so they didn't just focus on themselves, but they wanted to learn about other people who were different than them as well. And then the second goal or pursuit that they had was skills. They were trying to gain the skills and the proficiencies for mathematics, for science, for all the different content areas, right? And so like comprehension, things that we would normally see like in a Common Core state standard today. The third pursuit is intellectualism. All learning was connected to action. That's the difference that I describe in the book, from knowledge to intellectualism. The difference is that one is more action oriented, like intellectualism. And so as they were reading and writing and thinking and learning, they were becoming smarter about new ideals and concepts and people and places and things. They weren't just learning to develop skills alone. And the fourth pursuit that they had was with criticality. Now, this was an interesting one. I originally named it, which a lot of people don't know, print authority, because it was like they were learning, they would see themselves with identity, they would learn the skills with skills, they would learn the intellectualism, and they would use it to put their own critique and interrogate it to gain authority of the text. Right? We have authority of something when we know it well enough, where we can debate on it and where we can critique it. You can't just stand in a room talking about any topic if you don't have any knowledge. And you need the identity and the skills to get to that knowledge. So you can see how they were all connected. But criticality went a little further. Criticality was an understanding of equity, oppression, anti-racism. It was helping them to understand issues of marginalization, exploitation, and representation. And criticality, I'll just lastly add, it was something that helped them to, in their own words, I'm quoting here, it helped them to be able to discern between truth and falsehood at a glance. That was one of their major purposes for education. And this is something that can be useful for all students. And if I added a fifth pursuit, it would be joy. Because I noticed that even in the most turmoil of conditions and harshest and oppressive and racist times, they still loved each other and was able to cultivate joy with each other, which is very remarkable. Because when you have a lot of pain and struggle and everything is about resistance, to then say, you know what, we're gonna have joy. That's a beautiful, remarkable, humane kind of quality. And so the difference, to respond to your second question, when we take a look at those, let's say 5 pursuits, if we added joy, compared to what we see in schools and classrooms are largely solely or mostly pushing skills. Everything is about skill development. And it's not as much, unless you have very unique classroom spaces, about application. Even our Common Core state standards are grounded in skill development. We don't have adopted equity standards, identity standards, criticality standards, and how lovely it would be if we did, right? And so that's the difference. Our system is really, from the 1600s to today, we are still pushing skills, evaluating teachers on their ability to teach the skills, assessing skills. And that's what I'm trying to come away from, be more comprehensive and be more excellent.